Welcome to Thinking Green. I'm Rana, and it's really great this year. I'm not a candidate, so I get to dress a lot more informally. These are our campaign T-shirts for New London Board of Ed candidates this year, and we are giving them out to anyone who is willing to drop literature, do canvassing, stand at the polls, and otherwise help the campaign, maybe even just wear it around town everywhere. They're at our office at 243 State Street. So before I introduce tonight's guests, I just got a last minute notice on an event that is not on our community calendar. Safe Futures is holding its 40th anniversary Power of Purple 4K walk. So it benefits Safe Futures, a worthy New London organization. The walk is on Sunday, October 15th, 8:30 a.m. at Crystal Mall. And if you are interested in registering, you can go to their website, safefuturesct.org, and get more information about it. I think it looks as though people can walk as supporters, as teams, or just make donations to the cause. Election Day is November 7th, and between now and Election Day, the show will mostly be interviewing candidates of the region, and hopefully we'll also fit in a show about the school budget, but we haven't finalized that yet. So my guests tonight are Baird Welch-Collins, who is running for RTM in Waterford District 2, and Deb Kelly, who is running for Board of Education in Waterford. And I know this show does go out to Waterford, so hopefully there are viewers out there who can watch it. And as always, we'll put it up on YouTube and send the link around. So welcome, Baird.
Thank you, nice to be here.
And welcome, Deb.
Thanks.
And I guess the first question I have to ask any candidate is, why are you running? It seems kind of thankless, but also important.
Would you like to begin?
Sure. I guess I made the decision to run the day after the presidential election. At a point in my life where I have more time to give back to my community. My children are both out of public school and actually out of college, except for grad school, and I decided it was time to not just talk about it, but to do something. So as a lifelong educator, the Board of Education made the most sense to me.
And, well, I guess we'll talk about what the issues are in Waterford. I don't know if they're parallel to what New London is going through or somewhat different. You know, for two communities that are side by side, the political landscape is a little bit different between the two. Now, Baird, you have run for things before.
I have, yes. I ran for this office 2 years ago unsuccessfully in 2015. And my reason now is similar to my reason then, which was kind of this realization that the people who run for office all too often are people who simply want the office. They don't want to really affect change. And you know, I've never really considered myself to be a politician or someone who desired, you know, power or status just for the mere sake of it. And so I thought that because it was something that I didn't necessarily view as, you know, desirable in and of itself, I might be able to bring some objective light to the political situation in Waterford. And this year I'm particularly excited to run because the issues in Waterford are a little bit more intense than they were in 2015. We're facing some economic issues of particular pertinence. And I feel that my campaign this year is much more prepared and much more professional, prepared to win.
Well, good luck to you all. And the Waterford Greens are running a full slate, correct?
We are running a full slate.
So people, unlike in New London, people can really, wherever they are, vote Green for pretty much any office.
Yes, we're particularly excited about running 4 RTM candidates, one in each district.
Now, I guess for each of you, what kind of previous experience have you had that makes you qualified for what you're running for?
Well, as I mentioned, I'm a lifelong educator, so I'm currently an assistant principal at East Lyme High School, and before that I was a school counselor and the director of guidance there. So I definitely bring a lifetime of educational experience to the board should I be elected. I feel like that's one of the reasons I wanted to be on the board, is to bring to Waterford my experience in education instead of just people who are interested in, as Baird said, an elected position for the sake of the position, to actually bring some experience and expertise in the area of education.
And of course, boards of education are policy bodies. So what do you see as some policies that could be in place in Waterford that aren't, that would really make a positive impact on the system as a whole?
Well, some of the things that I would like to see Waterford move a little bit toward, and not just Waterford, but schools in general, is a more well-rounded approach to education, more toward personalized learning, and certainly away from standardized tests. I'm also a really big advocate for developing programs that can help students who are not necessarily going on to college or who are going on to a 2-year vocational school. We've really gotten away from hands-on learning, and that would be one of the things that I would want to advocate for. And money will be, how money is used would be probably one of the things I would really want to focus on as budget issues, and the state and where those dollars are going, making sure that they're on kids.
I lived in Waterford for about 16 years, and I think, back in those days, the sky was kind of the limit when it came to finances. Millstone was bringing in a ton of tax revenue, and I think Waterford is kind of, I wouldn't say they're totally stunned by the change, but they're unaccustomed to dealing with financial hardship.
Mm-hmm.
So in the school system, one time, I'm guessing you could really spend money on whatever you wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So in a more limited environment that we have now, what would you say are the top things that should be prioritized in the budget?
Well, certainly anything that is going to support the learning and students. That's really what I would want to do, is to try to make sure that the money, because it is limited, so it can't go across the board to whatever. It has to be focused, and it has to be focused to students and to all students. So it can't go to one population or the other. And that's one of the things that I would want to have an opportunity to inform, is just really how to make sure that we are reaching everybody.
Now, Baird, you're running for RTM. We don't have RTM in New London. Can
Correct.
you explain what a representative town meeting is?
A representative town meeting is a bit of a holdover from Puritan New England. It's kind of the town meeting style of democracy. And for all intents and purposes, the main difference is a town meeting is elected by districts rather than as a whole. So a city council or a town council, the whole town votes for the slate of candidates. Within an RTM, each of the town is divided up into districts. My district happens to be Quaker Hill and a little sliver of Waterford Village and some other areas.
So how many districts are there in Waterford?
There are 4 districts in Waterford. Oswegatchie Elementary School is the polling place for District 3. Town Hall is District 1. Great Neck is District 4. And in my district, District 2, people can vote at Quaker Hill Elementary School.
And how many representatives are there from each district?
It varies slightly, I believe, but from my district, there are 5 representatives sent.
So town meeting really has more people in it in general than a city council would.
Yes.
For a similarly sized town. Thinking of New London with the population of 27,000, which might not be that different from Waterford's population. We have 7 members, and it seems as though you probably have more like 15 to 20 in your RTM.
I think it's slightly over 20.
Yeah.
And that is just it's the body that passes ordinances for the town.
Yeah, it serves the same function municipally.
Well, very different. So I guess I'm intrigued, because in New London we have at times try to start some kind of district representation,
Right.
and we're always often told, well, that sets all the different parts of town against each other. As I'm sure you've gone to meetings over the last couple of years, in practice, is that something that you've seen?
That's not something that I've seen in Waterford, which speaks pretty highly of the town, especially because my district is a little bit unique, because we actually are kind of one of those Connecticut kind of town within a town. Quaker Hill has its own postcode, has its own post office, has its own name, but candidates don't usually run on regional issues because the region of Quaker Hill, the issues are pretty common to all of Waterford. So I think that in many ways having people represent a smaller district is good. At least on the campaign level, it lets you connect face to face with a higher percentage of the people who are going to be voting for you, and you can really hear the concerns of people a lot more efficiently.
Now, what would you say are the RTM issues that are facing Waterford now and for the next few years?
Well, the big issue that's on everyone's mind is the state budget and how that's impacting Waterford and all the towns around Connecticut. We took a cut in the recent state budget. It was not an enormous one, but it was still a cut. And Waterford, as you mentioned previously, has for many years been really an economic success and an economic boom period. But now is the time for belt tightening, and when that happens, politics becomes interesting. So negotiating how Waterford moves into a period where spending is going to have to necessarily be cut back and services are going to have to be rearranged is really very important. And I think that it's the time that we heard a different voice, at least a third voice, in that discussion, because it's one that's going to impact what Waterford looks like for a very long time.
Now, I'm guessing you have both, talked to a lot of voters, knocked on some doors. What kind of responses have you gotten?
Go ahead.
Well, I've been knocking on a lot of doors in Quaker Hill, and I'll be knocking on quite a few more. And the responses that I've gotten have been overwhelmingly, almost shockingly positive. At least, in our, I come from a district that voted in the presidential primary overwhelmingly for Trump and Bernie. So there is a very real esprit of disestablishmentism, both from the left and the right in my district. And I'm very proud to say that Quaker Hill has some very educated voters. And, most of the people that in fact, I haven't talked to a single person yet who plans to vote for, straight across the party line. Especially in municipal elections, I found that people really want to carefully pick and choose who they're voting for.
And I guess the system helps them really become familiar with all the candidates.
Yes.
Which, for RTM at least, I don't know if it's quite the same for Board of Ed, because that is a town-wide position.
It's a little bit more challenging to get to know the whole town. My experiences so far with people have been very interesting. I am running as a Democrat, and I've been cross-endorsed by the Greens, which elicits different responses
Right.
depending on who you're talking to. Some people are thrilled that you're associated with a third party. Other people are a little hesitant about that. Being a Democrat, that can go either way depending on whose door you're knocking on.
Well, I guess, for one thing, I am going to invite people who are watching to call in if you have questions or comments. But I did definitely want to talk about just the general issue of partisanship, especially at the local level, because Waterford is doing something a little bit different from what's been done in other towns. People from New London know that a few times over the last 16 years, Green Party candidates have been cross-endorsed by the Republicans, which made sense at the time, but it's hard to explain now how it made sense. New London has a single-party monopoly to a large extent, and so there have been times when the only way to keep from having every elected official be a Democrat is for the Republicans and the Greens to agree to support some candidates. And it hasn't happened very often. It's happened 4 times in about 30 elections we've run in since 2001, but it has made a difference. But the whole idea of partisanship, people think that how we do things in Connecticut is how everyone does things.
Yeah.
And that really isn't the case. In many states, local elections are not partisan at all. And in many states, even where parties are listed, the ballot doesn't really look the way it does here. So you can see what party people are members of, but it doesn't really affect their placement on the ballot.
Right.
And it's really a little bit of background information. So, we'll be interested in the debriefing at the end. To what extent, I guess I can ask each of you this separately, to what extent are platform issues similar between the Democrats and the Greens in Waterford?
Well, on municipal issues, and it's worth noting, Waterford and New London are very, very different towns. Waterford has historically been an agrarian community, and the evidence of that is still around. It's a much kind of more spread out town that has a much more rural, suburban feel, and the political issues tend to be less divisive and a little bit more calming, I guess would be the word. So the similarity of issues, it comes down to, usually in these municipal elections, it's less the platform and more how people, how their outlook affects how they're going to move forward. Because you can talk about your platform all you want, but the issues we're talking about today are not going to be the issues when we're sworn into office in January, should we have the good fortune of winning. And people are going to have to vote for the candidate that they think is going to be able to make up the best platform, essentially on the fly, as they see the issues come before them. And on those sorts of issues, focusing more on a general ideological bend. And I would encourage voters to make choices for candidates that reflect a very independent, people-focused platform, such as I hope to do.
And I think that the Democrats and the Greens have very similar, as far as education is concerned, very similar goals: to support students and teachers toward the best possible education that we can provide, using the budget, actually making sure that there is money available. And so I don't see there being a huge difference in how we approach education. And I completely agree with Baird. I think what the person brings to the table, more so than the platform that they're running on, is probably a little bit more indicative of what's going to happen over the next, for me, 4 years if I should win, and the energy and experience that you bring.
And once you are sitting there, I served one term on the Board of Education in New London in 2009, and once you're sitting there, you're all a single board, and my experience was there was no specific group of allies that I always agreed with. Different issues. There were some times when the board I was on had 4 Democrats, 2 Republicans, and 1 Green. And sometimes the way we'd vote, it would be totally non-controversial. Sometimes I'd vote with the Democrats. Sometimes we had odd coalitions that included some of us from each of the parties working together. I think once you're sitting at the table together, ability to work in a team probably means a little bit more than what party alignment you have.
Yeah. I'm on the Flood and Erosion Control Board in Waterford. I was actually recently elected as treasurer of the Flood and Erosion Control Board, and the experience, granted it is a non-elected board, it's appointed, but partisanship really doesn't play a role. We work together, we look at the issues, and we work on projects essentially, and that's really an admirable thing, and that's something that having a third party involved in town government really pushes. Because the minute you have a multi-party democracy, people are forced to form coalitions, and they're forced to reach across the 2 aisles that now exist to start working together. And that creates an environment that is oftentimes very productive and very respectful.
Now, what issues have come across the Flood and Erosion Control Commission that are things that the whole town needs to look at from an RTM point of view?
Well, the Flood and Erosion Control Board in Waterford is kind of in the process of being revitalized. For a number of years, the board only had 2 members, and now it has 5 again, which is a good, healthy quorum number, although I think we'd like to ultimately get back up to 7. And as goes along with that, we're looking at what we reasonably can do and what kind of budget we can ask for to start tackling some projects. Historically, the Flood and Erosion Control Board has limited itself to looking at the interaction of Long Island Sound and the land, and Quaker Hill, Keeney Cove, Alewife Cove down by Waterford Beach. But myself and a lot of people know that especially in Quaker Hill, there's a big issue with flooding. There are culverts, there are streams that are clogged, they're out of date, they need maintenance, and that's something that we'd like the board to be able to bring to light and facilitate the maintenance of. These are not expensive projects. This is somebody going down and pulling sticks out of the culvert so that it doesn't cost thousands of dollars to someone's house. These are very basic things that the RTM could play a big role in addressing. And as I've been going around talking to people in Quaker Hill, flooding, small-scale flooding as a result of poor maintenance is a really big issue on people's minds, because it's a very hilly area, and if you happen to live at the bottom of one of those hills, you're going to be in for a bad time.
Now, do you think that there's more of a sense of urgency now to deal with that, now that we've been seeing an increase in storms and serious storms, and Waterford, like New London, has a lot of coastline, and things like flooding, like stormwater management, erosion, pollution of the Sound and the Thames River seem like they're more important than ever, because we have had several years of drought, but it could flip in a year.
Absolutely.
And we see all over the country places that are not prepared for flooding being flooded.
And we got lucky this year. We watched all hurricane season long, these storms coming up and then veering off. For a while they thought Irma was going to come right into Connecticut, and it only takes one. And being in a state of drought can sometimes make the soil a lot more vulnerable to flash flooding. And the damage that would be incurred in Waterford would be significant, because a lot of these maintenance projects and repairs are not ready for that kind of massive outpouring of water. And it seems like a small issue, but when it's your basement that's got 3 feet of water in it, it's not a small issue, and we can prepare now to prevent that from happening.
And it's actually the ultimate issue to be nonpartisan about,
Yes.
because no one's going to say, no, you're wrong, I want my basement to flood.
And yet somehow nothing's been done about it.
Well, we hope to make a change,
We
right?
hope to make a change.
And you said potentially there will be 5 members after this election, or are there?
There's the members of the Flood and Erosion Control Board
that's,
are appointed.
okay, that's,
so
now
if-
will you
if
be
would
able to
like
continue on that if you
Yes.
are elected?
Yes,
It's
I
not
will
a
continue.
conflict.
It's not a conflict, no.
Oh, that's good to know.
It is good to know.
Yeah, well, so you have many more elected positions than New London does, and it's kind of intriguing to me. We have a mayor, city council, and board of ed that are elected, and everything else is appointed. So planning and zoning is appointed, inland wetlands is appointed, the board of assessments, appeals. We have so many appointed committees. I don't know, there are pages and pages and pages listed, but we have very little that is elected. So does that have an impact on your government, that things like planning and zoning and wetlands conservation are elected positions? Do you think that, I don't know, is a good thing or a bad thing?
I think that it tends to be a good thing, because I tend to be in, the more democracy, the better. But there are certainly challenges. The more people you have involved in any project, the more complicated it becomes. But I forget who it was that said it, or perhaps nobody said it, but democracy isn't supposed to be fast, and it isn't supposed to be easy. It's supposed to produce the best result. And that requires competition, it requires conflict, and it requires forcing people that don't agree to find the middle ground, because that's what the founding fathers thought the best solution was going to be.
And I think it is important that people with the different perspectives and different kinds of skin in the game have to sit down together and hash it out.
I think it also provides more opportunity for people to run for office.
Yes.
So somebody who maybe isn't ready to run for something that is RTM or Board of
True.
Education has an opportunity to run for something that, they can get their feet wet in first.
Now, Waterford has done a lot of school construction projects and done them very well over the last decade, or maybe a little more than decade. Are there any other school construction projects on the horizon, or is that something that Waterford can kind of relax about for right now?
To the best of my knowledge, they have 3 brand new, not brand new, but like you said, relatively new elementary schools and a new high school and a renovated middle school. I don't think that they have any big construction projects on the horizon. They timed it well. The state had opportunities for them to, share in their wealth a little bit. That's not necessarily the case anymore. So
Yeah, they were well-timed projects.
yeah, they're well-timed projects.
Yeah, and they had, unlike New London, and I sigh, they were constructed as green buildings.
Yes.
They were.
Yes.
And New London's were not, and were not particularly less expensive. So I'm sure in the long run, school maintenance costs will be lower as a result of some of these past decisions.
Yeah, I think they were built with foresight.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And, the school issue we can kind of relax on, but town infrastructure is not something we can relax on. And the question becomes, do we delay these projects till a more financially viable time, or do we jump on them now before things get worse? And that you have to kind of take it with a case-by-case basis. But building things right, building them durable, using the best construction materials, which often coincide with the greenest construction materials, saves money in the long run, it saves headache, it's better for the taxpayers.
Does Waterford find itself in a position that they're giving tax breaks to big developers? Have the financial problems gotten to that point of almost a sense of desperation about bringing in potentially big projects?
Things haven't gotten that bad on any significant level in Waterford yet. In fact, things in Waterford, it would be a mistake to call them bad, period. Waterford is not broke by any means. We're not Scotland, Connecticut. We're doing fairly well, but the question is, how long does that continue? And the big looming threat on the horizon is Millstone, of course, because no matter how much money the state throws at it, it's going to have to close within the next 15 years, I guess now 14 years. And at some point, the question is going to have to be asked, should that money really be going to keep Millstone open for another 2 years, or should it be going into the community that's going to be devastated by the sudden loss of taxpayer revenue?
That's a really big question.
question.
Yeah. And I happen to be a huge proponent of investing in infrastructure that supports everything, not just any single taxpayer, and that pays off in the long run. But Millstone is a huge looming threat, partly because of the loss of tax revenue, and partly because, unless I miss something, the question of what to do with the waste has never been solved.
Well, that's an issue for all nuclear plants in the country. And it's an issue that's often overplayed. The waste at Millstone, I've seen it personally. I actually walked around it with a Geiger counter with Josh, another RTM candidate. And there's no radiation leaking out of it. Probably more radiation coming out of the concrete that's encased in than the rods themselves. But that's something that's eventually going to have to be addressed at the federal level, because moving the waste is not necessarily the best solution. And it's worth noting it is stored awfully close to the water. So
Right, and if sea levels rise, there could be a problem.
Yeah, but that's an
I
issue
tend to be a
for
pessimist just because If you're a pessimist, you plan,
That's an
and you
issue.
might not be caught unaware.
It's an issue for 50 years in the future.
We'll still be around.
True.
So we talked a little about the economy. We talked, in terms of environmental issues, I don't, is there any work being done, or are you planning to bring up more, creating a more walkable or bikeable town?
Yes, that's one issue that we've been pushing for a long time. So for years, Waterford and the town government has been throwing around this idea of downtown Waterford. And it makes great sense. We're going to create a space where small businesses can develop, where we can get some tourist energy. And for a while, people were talking about working down at Mago Point, and now people are talking about we're going to build it around Town Hall. And wherever we do it, some conditions need to be met. Number one, it's a very good idea. It's an excellent idea. But building it closer to Niantic, in my opinion, would be wonderful, because it could be made easily accessible by bike or by foot, and even by car, and it'd be closer to, the beaches. Waterford has an opportunity here, but it has to be done right. And we can also do it in a way where we make money off of it, we don't lose money, and that really needs to be key. Because, during the presidential election, there's a lot of talk of running the country like a business. And that's that's not always what you want to do. But to a certain extent, when you're running any sort of government, you want to try to be taking in more money than you're putting out. Sure. That's basic economics 101 you learn in first grade. And we need to really, if we're going to do it, we need to do it right. And that really is an important issue.
Well, and I think that, the way the suburbs developed, Waterford, 50 years ago,
right.
And other places that are a little farther out, is, there were big parcels of farmland, so it was easy enough to build a mall or to build,
right.
A huge industrial plant of some sort. But as people move in and things get more developed, you have to start looking at infill
Yes.
development. It's less of a stress on your infrastructure, and on a per acre basis, you actually may even reap more benefits.
Right. Well, Waterford is filled with land and businesses and houses and buildings that are empty and vacant. And it's oftentimes very tempting for developers to look at fresh, undeveloped land and say, we build here, we just flatten it out and we start building. We don't have to take down the structure that was there. We don't have to clean up the environmental spill. That's not in our best interest. Waterford is a wonderful town, and it's a wonderful town partly because it has a lot of green spaces, it has a lot of open spaces. I don't think anybody in Waterford wants to be living in a town that's surrounded by a bunch of empty lots. And this is an issue for almost more the Zoning Board of Appeals than RTM. But we need to make sure that new development is happening in these spots that are abandoned. For almost my entire life, I've driven by this one abandoned spot right on the corner of Clark Lane and Boston Post Road. And, if a business wants to develop, let's put it there. Let's find these places and put it there. Let's not stick it out, in the middle of the woods.
Right, because the open space in Waterford is a really important resource for the residents.
Absolutely.
Not to mention for the environment, because
a lot of wetlands.
What's good for the environment is good for the residents.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting to hear the idea of transitioning somewhat from attracting the huge businesses when Waterford was almost all open space to adapting as there's more population, more houses, and businesses that have run their course.
Right.
Maybe before we start looking at ballots and candidates and events, can you give a really brief history of the Waterford Green Party?
Sure. So the Waterford Green Party was founded primarily by myself and Josh Kelly. How many years ago? I guess 2014? That sounds right. 2014. So we've been around for quite a few years.
Turned 18 in 2013.
Yeah, so 2014. That sounds right. And we founded it because We lived in Waterford. We felt that the time was right for a new political voice. And since then, our first election, we ran one candidate. Our second election, we got one candidate elected to the Zoning Board of Appeals alternate. And now here we are running a full slate of candidates. We've got signs up all over town, and we're running a professional campaign. So I think the history of the Waterford Green Party so far has been a success story. And people always say, they don't expect, a Green Party to develop in kind of suburban Connecticut. But the reality is, why not? This is a place where people can afford to focus on issues, to be as educated about issues as possible. They aren't necessarily dealing with the day-to-day survival issues that you find, unfortunately, in a lot of Connecticut cities. And so it's also New England, which is a big deal. We have a different type of democracy here. As in the RTM races, I'll point out, people can choose up to 5. That's not quite, proportional representation, but it's starting to touch it. And for all these issues, Waterford really is the perfect place to have a third party develop.
Well, it's interesting to me because many people have the perception of the Green Party as being primarily motivated by environmental concerns. But it is true that in Connecticut, the Green Party activity is mostly centered around cities where there are other kinds of concerns, social justice concerns, safety concerns, budgetary concerns, and I think it is just now starting to blossom in other areas. Waterford was there 3 or 4 years ago, and now the various shoreline towns between Waterford and New Haven are starting to have some green activity, and I think their issues are not that different from what your issues are.
Right. Yeah, they're very similar issues.
Whereas New London and Willimantic and New Haven might have more similar issues, but the shoreline towns all have some things in common, and of course New London has some things in common just by being a shoreline town. When the FRA, high-speed rail bypass was slated to come through all of our towns and disrupt our historic places, I saw an amazing unity of every town from Madison through Stonington to the Rhode Island border, and whether they were Republican towns or Democratic towns, every town was in agreement.
We saw the same thing in Waterford. I looked at the map, and it looked like the railway was going to run over a lake. It was going to go within like 2 miles of my house, and people were not particularly happy about that prospect. I think whoever designed the initial plan just kind of drew a line.
I think they did because I had a concern because, of course, Riverside Park is something I've been involved with, and the whole disruption of foot traffic and car traffic between the north end of New London, north of I-95, and everything else south. And the train was going to be in that basic I-95 corridor and go over the Thames River in a bridge between the 2 spans of the Gold Star. And no one could really tell us where the approach to that bridge would be. And there was real fear that it was going to gobble up the commercial strips along the frontage roads.
Yeah.
So your comment that it looks as though a line was drawn on a map without any consideration of what was really on the ground, I think is very apt.
Yeah.
And we can do a lot when we see it as a single unifying issue. I wanted to talk about and we mentioned it a little bit before, about partisanship in local elections, because as viewers, New London viewers know, the Greens and the Republicans have done some cross-endorsing without really having a fusion campaign, but just as a way to equalize political power. And this year the Waterford Greens have been working fairly closely with the Waterford Democrats in a town that I think the Republican and Democratic parties are more even. And, you know, I think some people are critical of that. Some people love it. As you pointed out, Deb, you know, when you talk to people, there is no one set response to it. But I kind of wanted to, I brought, and unfortunately it's not a PowerPoint, so I am going to ask a little bit of like zooming in on other ballots. But there are many places where handed to Baird. Yes, so that where although statewide elections like governor, attorney general, or any kinds of members of the assembly, certainly congressman or president, are partisan elections. But if you look at this one from sample from Arlington, Virginia, when you're voting for school board, there are no parties there. When you're voting for county board, which I'm guessing is similar to city council or RTM, there are no parties listed. So you really have to get to know the candidate. So it wouldn't be reinventing the wheel if Connecticut's elections became a little bit less partisan.
Even in the ones that do have parties, there's no line for the party. It's you
As
have to look at the
Yes,
position
as
you're running
opposed
for.
As
to,
opposed to what we have here.
Just by party.
There we go.
yeah, and to look at the New London one, and I'll hand this one to Baird, there's a random piece of it because here in the Waterford ballot, the Democratic Party is line A, the Republican Party is line B, the Green Party is line C. And here, the Green Party in New London has been bumped to line 4.
And you
Because
note this is a sample ballot.
It is,
In
yes.
case you were wondering.
This is a sample. Eventually, within the next week or two, I expect that people in all towns will be able to go to the Secretary of State's website and find the sample ballots that correspond with their town and their districts.
Yes.
We got these sort of at the last minute because those are not posted yet.
And I will remind voters that you can take a sample ballot with you into the voting booth. You can take a picture of your ballot. I posted some pictures of this ballot, when we got it online, and immediately got a flurry of messages. Wait, isn't that illegal? No, it is not. You can do anything you want except cheat.
Yeah. And so, it's really quite confusing. A few years ago, even people who voted on the green line thought that meant they couldn't vote for individual Democrats or Republicans. We have talked to people knocking on doors who have said, I'm a registered Democrat, so I'm only allowed to vote for Democrats.
Yep, I've heard that as well.
And all of these are real obstacles to having a democracy that represents the voters because they're voting for people for reasons other than that those are their favorite
best
candidates.
candidate, right.
And so I guess I want to make a pitch here as Green Party members, and this is not an opinion shared by Green Party members everywhere, that at a certain point we have to not think too much about party differentiation, and
Yeah.
we have to think about things we can sit at the table and move forward together.
Well, if one thing you look at, if you look at where Green parties have been successful in countries that have similar voting systems to the U.S., the Green parties have been very successful by being regional, by focusing on specific areas and the issues, most important to those specific areas, rather than these kind of broad national campaigns that focus on issues very superficially. And that's something that in Waterford we've really tried to, build off of. The Canadian Green Party is this way, the UK Green Party is this way. Neither of these are particularly large, examples of wildly successful Green parties, but they're both more successful in the Green Party here in the US. And I think it's because they focused on being regional parties.
I think that's true. And I know in New London we have been around for a long time. We started running candidates in 2001. And there are some we have some fairly loyal voters who actually disagree with us about a lot. There are many, people who are in the taxpayer group, and they will vote green because they know that we don't take bribes, we don't take corporate money or lobbyist money. We only take money from people.
Yes.
And that's a big deal because they feel as though even if they disagree with our decisions or our opinions, we'll come by them honestly. And that's a big deal for many voters to know that the people in office are going to look after the voters' best interest and the residents' best interest rather than the lobbyists' best interests.
Exactly.
So, I think that is a huge piece of our success. And also that we do try to have a big presence in appointed boards and commissions.
Yeah.
We have fewer electoral opportunities than in Waterford, but many opportunities to be appointed. So we have 5 minutes left, I think I've been told. So let's talk.
We have no calendar.
Oh, then we have a little more than 5 minutes left. Okay, we do not have a community calendar. I'm not quite sure what the glitch was, but I think we can spend the next part of the meeting then talking about events that are coming up.
Sure.
And the first thing I want to mention is tomorrow night in New London from 5:30 to 8:30 is the food stroll.
Right.
And we assume that there will be strollers from New London and from Waterford and other surrounding towns. And so we invite people to come to our New London campaign office, which is 243 State Street. It's about a block up from City Hall, a block down from the Guard, next to the Edible Arrangements store. And there will be some Waterford candidates there.
There will.
Myrna and Eric, who are running for Board of Education in New London, will be there. I don't think we'll be providing food because everyone will get plenty other places, though we might provide water and beverage because that is maybe a little harder for the strollers to come by. But come in, we'll have literature, you'll be able to informally talk to people, and it's a really pleasant space to hang out if you just want to sit down and relax. So that's tomorrow, October 11th, from 5:30 to 8:30. And I will talk a little bit about the New London candidate forums and debates. Waterford has many fewer or none at all at this point, but we'll keep people posted as we find out.
The only candidate forum is actually hosted by us, the Waterford Green Party, and it is on November 4th at 4 p.m. at Philomena's Restaurant in Waterford.
And now, will there be any kind of formal question and answer, or is it more like meet and greet all the candidates?
It's more of a meet and greet, but each candidate will be giving a statement, and people are certainly encouraged to come and ask questions.
Okay, so that's November 4th, the Saturday before Election Day.
That is correct.
And I will read off the New London ones because we don't have a slide for them. For City Council candidates, there will be a forum this Friday at the New London Senior Center the whole event is 5 to 8:30 p.m. I think 5 to 6 is a meet and greet, and then 6:30 to 8:30 will be question and answers, and that is sponsored by the New London Neighborhood Alliance, and they are hosting a Board of Ed candidate forum the following Friday, October 20th, basically the same format, meet and greet to start with, and then a more formal question and answer period. Wednesday, October 18th, at the New London Library, New London Landmarks is sponsoring a forum that's primarily going to ask council candidates about their opinions, their stands on preservation issues, because in New London, what happens with the old structures we have and the old open spaces we have they're big issues. Monday, October 23rd, there will be another candidate forum for City Council candidates sponsored by the League of Women Voters, the New London NAACP, and Centro de la Comunidad at the Science and Technology Magnet High School from 5:30 to 8:30. Tuesday, October 24th, there will be another event for Board of Ed candidates at 230 State Street, sponsored by Hearing Youth Voices, from 6 to 9 p.m. And then Monday, October 30th, there will be the League of Women Voters Board of Ed candidate forum. And that probably, unless you were writing it down, was a big jumble. It is on our New London Green Party website and on the various Facebook pages of our candidates. And I've seen that many of the other candidates are sharing the information as well. And now, are you seeking more volunteers for phone banks, for handouts, for spending time at the polls?
We always are. We've been going around. My goal in District 2 has been to knock on every door, and I'm on track to make that goal. And I know Josh's goal has been to knock on just about every door in the rest of Waterford. So we would love you to help.
How many doors does that add up to?
Too many. So if you would like to assist in that goal, even if you're not a Waterford resident, you just like us and want to help out, please contact us. You can contact us on Facebook, on our website, email. We've got the whole 9 yards. So.
And the website is Waterford Green Party?
WaterfordGreenParty.org, yes.
Okay. And then you mentioned November 4th, and I'm sure we'll have something in New London that weekend. I invite anyone who is walking around New London. We tend to have our office open during lunch hour from about 11 to 1:30 or 2 every day, sometimes in the evenings as well. Thursday night we do phone banking from there. And come in, get literature. We have free pins, Green Party is the Peace Party pins. Talk about issues, just relax. We let people use the bathrooms, whether they're going to vote for us or not. Unlike, signs that you see on doors that only patrons can use the bathroom. So yeah, you can stop in, talk about issues, and sometimes meet our candidates, because whenever they're available, they're there as well. Do you have any last words for our last minute?
I guess my closing statement would be, when you get your ballot, number one, vote, period. A lot of people don't. Please do. Your municipal election is arguably the one that will be most impactful on your life. But number two, when you get your ballot, I've always say, if you're voting for just one party, even if it's just the Green Party, you're probably doing it wrong.
It's true. Just a quick plug for the fact that we have a number of other people that are running.
Oh yeah, maybe list their names quickly, and then.
So in District 1 for RTM, we have Andrew Frascarelli, myself, obviously in District 2. In District 3, Joshua Steele Kelly. In District 4, Carl D'Amato. For Board of Finance, Kevin Kelly. For Board of Education, Deb. For Zoning Board of Appeals, Billie Jean Collins. And Darcy Van Ness for Zoning Board of Appeals alternate.
So look for all those names, and everyone, I'm sure, can be contacted.
Yes.
If you have questions.
Please contact us with any questions you've got.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Good luck with your door knocking and
Thank you.
For your campaign in general. We in New London would love to see more Greens in office in our area. Next week, we'll be back with more election stuff, and we'll see you then.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.